please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment. My sister has always had a soft heart. Soft as sweet bread. She cried after the old woman, despite everything. Maybe because of everything. I remember holding her as she wept, both of us covered in soot, her fingers scalded from holding shut the oven door. After the tears, she was quiet. She trailed me through the awful house, with its sweetbread walls and sugared windows. I found the clothes we'd arrived in, offered up her kirtle, and she donned it without a word. She showed no whisper of response when we found the treasure in the attic. Only nodded vaguely when I asked her to help me fill up the few bags we could easily carry back through the woods. Maybe it would be enough. Enough to keep us safe from our stepmother's whims. I do not want to go back there. It was the first she'd spoken in hours. I hesitated outside the witch's cottage, looking back over my shoulder at her. I do not want to go back to them, I sighed. Nor do I. But where else can we go? She wrung her fingers together in front of her skirt, eyes downcast and her teeth digging into her lower lip. Eventually, though, she nodded. Fine. You are right. She looked back at the house. Wait 1 minute. There may be something left in the kitchen. The kitchen? I repeated in horror, but she only nodded. Yes. She did not think I paid attention, but I did. I know which of her potions might be useful if nothing else. We can sell them when we get back. I nodded slowly and followed her back into the cottage, though I stopped in the open arch that led into the kitchen itself. She moved easily through the space, reminding me painfully of just how long she had been under the witch's thumb while the horrid crone tried to fatten me like a prize hog. She collected some dozen bottles and vials, tucking them carefully in between the bolts of silks and satins we had pilfered from the attic before returning to me. Let us go! Though there was no trail this time. She seemed to know her way through the trees. I asked how once, when we paused to wait out the dark. But all she said was that she simply knew now. As though the forest spoke to her in a way it hadn't before. I felt the first thrill of fear at that. But I knew that she was still so scared herself. I refused to let her see it. I tried to coax her into dreaming about what sort of life we might have with the witch's pilfered treasure, and managed to earn a wan smile for my efforts. But it was cold and dark, and soon enough we simply huddled together under a gnarled tree as we waited for the deepest part of night to pass, when grayish dawnlight began to filter through the leaves. She was the first to stand. She had gone quiet again, and only answered me with faint hums or single words as we continued on our way. She seemed more comfortable to be leading us now, but something in the set of her shoulders reminded me of something. Something I could not quite name. Eventually, I lapsed into her silence. When the trees broke apart to reveal the familiar shape of our father's home, she froze. Then she broke into a run, and I was only half a step behind her. The door was already opening when we reached the stoop, and our father met us with his arms open and tears in his eyes. He held us close and apologized over and over, praising the Lord's name. I embraced him in turn, but alongside the relief in my chest there was an anger in my gut. It had started a spark, but over the length of our trek back through the woods had grown into a steady flame. I met my sister's eyes over our father's shoulder, and a chill ran through me. If my anger was a flame, then hers was the dead cold of darkest winter. Our father explained that our stepmother had been stricken ill not long after we left. She was in her room now, asleep, and had been for days. He did not expect her to recover, though he had been following the physician's orders as best he could. "Perhaps she shall rally to see you," he offered us hopefully, when neither of us answered. He sighed and dragged a hand down his thick beard. There was more gray in it than I remembered. "I know you must be angry with me. With us, he told us wretchedly, that I could lose track of you so easily. It is an unforgivable failing in a father." "Lost?" I started slightly at the sharp edge in my sister's voice. Our father did too. She had always had a soft voice to match her heart. "We were lost?" she repeated, staring at him intently. Our father stared back, eyes wide with a hint of fear. "Lost," he confirmed at last in little more than a whisper. I dropped my eyes, unable to continue looking at him. My sister did not. Abruptly, she stood from our small table. "We will go see her then." I blinked, startled both by the sudden movement and the conviction in her voice, but I followed her into our stepmother's sick room. That flame of rage flickered a little higher in my chest, and I found that I could not make myself move more than 2 steps inside the door. My sister knelt beside the hateful woman and smoothed a hand over her brow in a gesture so tender it made me want to break something. "Here!" She tipped one of the witch's vials against her lips. "This will help." I almost reached out to stop her, but as though she sensed the movement, she held a staying hand back toward me. When the vial was empty, she stood and brushed her hands down the front of her skirt. She did not look at me as she left the room. I hesitated a moment longer behind her, staring at the woman who had left us to the wood and the wild. Already, breathing seemed easier. Anger and love for my sister Ward, twin flames in the center of my chest. She had always borne such a soft heart. Our stepmother was awake and lively within a day. Though shocked by our return, she was mollified enough by the offerings of treasure we had stolen away with that she simpered and even summoned up some mawkish tears through which to tell us she was so sorry we had been lost to the wood. My rage burned hotter, and my sister grew colder. "We should celebrate your return," our stepmother exclaimed, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, but no other sign of her illness remaining. "What do you wish for supper, my darlings?" "Sweetbread." I jerked around to stare at my sister, eyes wide and mouth agape. She did not so much as glance at me, but I felt her hand take mine under the table. She smiled at our stepmother, and my throat went dry. "But you are still recovering, stepmother." "I feel quite well, all things considered." "I shall make it," she offered gently. I could have stopped her then. Could have clutched her hand in mine and dragged us out. We could have taken the treasure and left. It had been foolish of me to think there was nowhere for us to go. We might go anywhere. Seeing our father again, hearing him refuse to admit what they had done, made me sure of that. But my sister looked at me just for a moment, and the ice in her gaze froze me to my chair. She was not looking for permission, but I nodded shakily anyway. Our stepmother exclaimed, "What a good, kind girl!" she was as she moved into the kitchen. Soon enough, the cloying smell of the baking sweetbread hung thick in the air. It was all I could do not to gag. My sister served the plates while the bread was still steaming gently, even drizzling the last of our honey stores over our parents' portions. "We could always get more at the market now," she said with a hollow little laugh. Our stepmother agreed happily, though our father hesitated a moment before doing so himself. He was watching my sister with a faint wariness as she took her seat beside me. "Go on, then, let us eat." They did. We sat in silence. It took our stepmother first. A faint cough, a furrow in her brow. She looked up with confusion, which changed quickly to a horrified realization as she stared at my sister. You? Our father choked, red spattering his lips. I looked away, squeezing my sister's hand tight where she had once more taken it beneath the table. We were desperate, he strangled out, reaching for her pleadingly. I did not want to. She made me. My sister shook her head. You let her. He collapsed forward onto the table, his breath a wheezing rattle that grew fainter with each passing moment. Our stepmother tried to lunge for us, but her legs gave out and she sprawled across the floor. A scarlet trail, like candy jam, trickled from the corner of her mouth. You? She gasped again, glaring balefully up at my sister. You? Little witch. They both began to convulse. I buried my face in my sister's shoulder. I could feel her stroking my hair even without raising my head. I knew she did not look away until their last breaths had faded into silence. Then she simply stood, her hand still in mine. We were both silent as we gathered up our bags still unpacked by the front door and stepped out into the cool evening. You are afraid. I swallowed. Why, yes. She smiled at me, squeezed my hand again, and all I felt was cold. You do not need to be. I will protect you. My sister has always had a soft heart. Soft as poisoned sweetbread. The girl in the graveyard is your best friend, so you take her home. The night is a bruise between you, a blotch of rogue in the passenger window, the color of fruit left out to fester. The body pries at her seatbelt, a finger, then two. The radio echoes static, the body shuffles in her seat. You study the face, the similar slice of jaw, the nose humped from where a baseball had hit her at 12, just slightly off center. The skin like a rain-licked plastic bag. The stink of musk and sulfur. You want to look away, but you cannot. She's so beautiful, even like this. Your headlights rake warbled slits through the dirt road, a yellow like jaundice. Your hands are stiff from the cold, your lips cracked. The girl beside you is dead, and you are bringing her home. 4 days ago, you'd stepped into a hardware store and emerged with a shovel sturdy enough to lift a life on. For days you'd spent digging dirt in your own backyard until loam muddied under your fingernails and erratic holes split garden beds like the mouths of greedy beasts. Until you could sift through soil with your eyes closed, with a hand bound. For nights you had laid in your bed staring at the pockmarked ceiling, wondering what it felt like to burn alive. Now, the shovel beats dull against the skin of your trunk, your hands gripping the steering wheel like a throat you're trying to silence. The body turns, dawn bleaching the salmon gray of her skin. The left eye slips from its socket, and she pushes it back in with the heel of her hand. She smiles, head lolling like a marionette's. Sorry, baby. Her voice comes out strained. I wasn't expecting company. I'm sure you understand. In a sickle of citrus moonlight, Adeline Marcus smiles up at you with shell-pale gums. Adeline Marcus died on the 31st of October and was buried a week later. The date on her gravestone a month shy of her 18th birthday. In the court, the boys would claim it was an accident, that they didn't know she was inside. For better or worse, you believe them. The fingers striking out matchboxes, the beer cans constellating the sidewalk. A prank gone too far, the wrong place, the wrong time. It doesn't have to be on purpose. She didn't have to be home. The coroner ruled it suffocation, but all you can imagine is flame like a stiff palm, striking over and over. Adeline had crawled from the mouth of the home on her hands and knees. She was dead by the time she reached the pavement, her Sunday dress cinched up to her knees, the dress you knew well enough, either way. The boys were left with 25 to life, and the Marcus were left with a dead daughter, a ring of ash like chalk on the pavement. You were left with a misplaced guilt like hunger, a guilt like an Ouroboros. Choking on the tail, swallowing the head, eating yourself alive, and being unable to stop. Even as it consumes you, because this wasn't the sort of thing that happened to good people. You watch water curl down your shower drain, carrying with it mortuary makeup, kaleidoscopic insects, and jasmine bubbles. Strings of dirt stretched out like sinew. The body's head rests on her knees, vertebrae needling through her back like a line of molars. The electric lights wash her green, dark veins rooted under brittle skin. She turns her face to the showerhead and picks at the powdery sediment under her fingernails. The shower floor is a mess of grit, and you think of a child scooping up the sand. You turn the heat up until it scalds, and scrub mildew from the base of the shower door. You think, if you could only get everything clean, everything will be all right. She turns her head and looks at you through eyes obscured by glass paneling. She says, "It's not as bad as all that. I don't even think I felt a thing." But she says it through lips the color of spoiled plums, so the sentiment doesn't ring true. You lift threadbare towels from the bottoms of your linen closet. You walk 3 times around your block and return to a corpse sat on your sofa like she has nowhere better to be. There are ants in your sugar bowl. You try to remove them, lift their crystal-knotted bodies on the prong of a fork, but they slip between the gaps, and you are left with a mess bigger than when you started. Tea-brown sludge bleeding from thoraxes and the stink of vinegar. There's a dead girl on your sofa, but let's focus on the ants in your sugar bowl, the way they thread through cysts of white like veins on a leaf. Like the capillaries that run through the skin of your face, you make tea anyway. You add too much milk and sit cross-legged in front of the body. She stares at you. You stare back. The two of you drink and ribbons of watery milk pour clean out her trachea, the gaping hole in her chest, but she doesn't stop drinking until you do. "You're not looking at me," she says. "Not really." "Yes, I am." You twist your hands in the shag carpet. "Aren't I now?" "No," she says. "You're not." You leave your teacup on the floor, saucer and iris of yellow, and go upstairs. You take 2 cigarettes from the carton squashed on your father's desk, and then think better of it. Press down with your heel until tobacco dissipates into the tawny carpet. You change your bed sheets twice, eggshell white, no, gray with peonies. You make a second cup of tea. When you get back to the room, the body is still there. You are looking at her. You are not looking at her. "Do I disgust you?" she says. "No." She shakes her head, dark hair plastered to her shoulders like reeds. "No more than I always did." "You need to sleep," you say. "Baby." She tilts her head to one side. "Sleeping is all I've ever done." "The last time you saw Adeline Marcus alive was in the back of a stranger's car, parked on a stranger's street, with the taste of a stranger's tequila fresh between your lips." You were never too built for parties, so the outcome was a pair of girls who looked like they were playing dress-up. Blousy dresses with sleeves like a nun's. Thrift store necklaces noosing your necks. Shoplifted lipstick which she hid beneath her mattress, more wax than pigment. But in the citrus peel of streetlights, in the low trill of distant music, the two of you looked beautiful. She had her legs curled under her and was sitting sideways in the back seat, her hand resting on her knee and the other palm against the window, a song on her lips that you couldn't quite place. You were too close, but it was night, and everyone was inside and drunk, and sometimes we all need to feel closer than we should be to lose ourselves a little. The song melted on her lips, swallowed into the limp press of salvia and booze, and you said something like, "I think I should go home now." And she said something like, "Have another drink." And so you did. You let her pour the liquor into the flimsy mouths of red plastic cups and watched her swallow. She said, "You're so pretty." And you said, "I think you should stop." And she said, "Just let me say that one thing." And you wanted to say, "Stop fucking looking at me like that." And you wanted to say, "I want to crawl inside you and make a life for myself in the city of your mind." And you wanted to say, "Let's just be quiet. Let's just not talk. Let's just not ruin a good thing by telling the truth." Instead, you pushed open the passenger door, stumbled out onto the skin of veined blue sidewalk. "I'm going home now." The body lays with her back to your bed, hands warming in the floral sheets, chestnut hair spilling across her throat. Past the ballpoint pen-marred bedposts, over the gray skin of her forehead, you are thinking about the silken mouth of a coffin. You are thinking of how she looked when you pulled her from the rose mouth of heaven. The radiator hums. A lace curtain bellies your open window. She rolls over onto her side, slots her hands together like pieces of a decaying jigsaw puzzle. "You still can't even look at me." Her mouth moves too slowly, words like chewing gum. "Why am I here?" "Bet? What's it for?" "There are pink crescent moons on the bed of your palms from the bite of your nails." She pulls her knees to her chest and a bone cracks. She pulls her knees to her chest and a molar tumbles from between her keyhole lips. "You can only love me when I'm not here." "You can only love me when there's nothing left to love." You press your cheek to the cool spread of linen beside her. You listen to the steady beat of your heart, the way you can feel it in your fingertips, entirely singular. "Don't tell anyone," you say. "Did you want it to die with me, Bet?" She shifts and her hair falls against the nape of your neck. "Were you glad it was silenced?" "Don't tell anyone," you say again. She sighs, lays herself back down so you're face to face. Crooked nose, eye pulling from its socket, the onset of gray-green decay wreathing her jaw. The smell of soil and rot and cicada-heavy nighttime. "Who could I tell?" She brushes your hand. "I'm not really here." And suddenly you can imagine it is your fist splitting beer cans in two like overripe fruit. It is your fingers on the matchbox, your fingers striking out. But you both know the house would still be on fire, and you both know you'd leave alone. You take her hand. You put your face in the crook of her neck and beg forgiveness from a ghost.
Алло. Я надеюсь, Серега все записал. Ой, я вырубил случайно на половине.